I'm Dylan Marma, and you're listening to Operators and Allocators, a podcast dedicated to exploring how to make smart investment decisions and execute well in real estate and private equity. We'll be interviewing top-notch sponsors from various asset classes to understand how they think and the frameworks that they put in place with the goal of achieving above-average risk-adjusted returns.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Operators and Allocators podcast, RV Campground mini-series special. Troy and Dylan here. Today we're going to be talking about ways we add value to RV campgrounds. So I understand there are a lot of mom and pops in this space, and with that, many times they don't focus necessarily on their marketing and promotion and advertising, and with that, sometimes no website at all, or if there is a website, it's very outdated. So there's a lot of, low-hanging fruit, so to speak, a lot of meat on the bone, in addition to several other ways we could add value. So if you'd like to get us kicked off, Dylan, and talk a little bit more about how we add value to these RV campgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely, Troy. I'd be happy to. So as you said, we are value-add investors, and in any type of real estate or asset we purchase, we're typically looking for something that has pretty visible, clear upside. And I always think to myself, I don't want the upside to be something that we have to hire people that are able to go out there and spit fire and do backflips to be able to realize, right? I want it to be something that using an everyday person, a common team, we can really effectively execute and do well to be able to drive the income and drive the values of the communities. And I think to backstep, right, you have to just put yourself in the position of the current owners. Generally, these are folks that have owned the campground for oftentimes 30 years, let's say, right? They probably don't have much of a mortgage, if a mortgage at all. So they're not really worried too much with being able to drive the income to be able to cover their mortgage. They probably take home a decent amount of cash. Yet at the same time, this is probably their only asset or one of just a few assets. So this is usually their nest egg, right? And that cash is meaningful to them. So they oftentimes are using that to live off of rather than reinvesting back into the campground all the time. So that usually means they're not always maximizing the number of sites in the land. They're not always maximizing the number of amenities and just focusing on how to drive that compounded growth, like we often are, because we are full-time investors, right? And that's what we do. So that's just a quick backstory to put it all into perspective. And let's talk about the different ways we add value, starting with some of the low-hanging fruit. Then we'll get into some of the additional income streams that we can drive to really optimize the place to the T. So low-hanging fruit when it comes to RV campgrounds, there's nothing more than when we find a great campground in a good location and usually a loyal initial camper base, but they just don't even have a website, right? They're off the grid. There's zero online presence, yet they're still managing to do pretty well. That tells you there's something to the place, but by getting that on a website, that's a great starting point to really starting to get some additional exposure. A lot of the times the websites look like they're 20 years old. Giving that additional facelift to the website, I think, is really going to increase the appeal, especially to the younger demographics that grew up on the internet. I think that there's something to be said about having a website and a decent social media presence. Just makes them feel more comfortable with the place that they're heading into. I think they'll have more familiarity and more of a general good feeling about the place before they initially show up and arrive there. Then once you have the website built, it's getting plugged in with an online booking engine. So we've been using CampSpot, and there are a number of different tools that will provide you with an online booking service. So you can basically label the number of sites, the different type of sites, and we find that 40% of campers will book online before their stay, especially for short-term stays. Usually you have to call in if you're doing an annual site agreement or something along those lines. But we see 40% roughly of bookings coming through online. That saves our managers a ton of time. We have certain campgrounds that get well over 100 bookings each week. So if you're able to start offsetting some of those to online, you're going to see a much higher conversion rate because the managers are only able to do so many bookings each and every week over the phone. Then you have online marketing. So putting some ad spend behind Facebook ads, Instagram, Google ads, a lot of the other different mechanisms available to getting the brand out there. That is a great way to be able to drive some additional demand and expose people that otherwise may not have been exposed to that campground specifically. And there's a lot of ways to be hyper targeted with your marketing over time. So I think that's super important. Those are some of the early things that we look for. And that's, as you notice, that's all offsite. Right now, let's get into some of the things that we can do on site when it comes to physical improvements to be able to just drive the value to the customers. So one is expansion and development plays. We always look at the acreage on the campground when we're looking at purchasing, because we love to see that there's additional acres of land that are not being utilized that we can go and develop additional sites on. Because once you have your bathhouse, and once you have your laundry room, and once you have all of your amenity sets all in one place, your clubhouse, pool, everything else, then it doesn't cost that much to be able to add an additional site. And for every additional site, you can create a ton of additional value in the process of doing so. So the expansion plays are definitely one of what we believe to be some of the highest value creation investments that you can make as an RV campground owner. We like to add park model cabins. If you look at recent surveys, I don't have the exact figure, but you'll see that a lot of the times park models or staying in a cabin. Let's just explain what a park model is. A park model is usually a manufactured home that fits the guidelines that RV manufacturers need to be able to hit. So it's usually 399 square feet. And usually they have, they're on wheels and they can be pulled by a truck. And these are usually they're not built for long-term living. They're built for temporary stays, and they can fit into, from what we understand, every RV site in the country, just as far as they meet the zoning requirements to be able to be parked in an RV campground. So park model cabins are great. And we find that there's for every two people that want to stay in an RV, there's one person that wants to stay in a park model, from what we've seen. And especially for folks that like to RV and camp, but they have friends and family that don't own RVs, that can be a great way for them to be able to take a vacation together and to get to experience the RV life without owning an RV. So park model cabins, we think, is a huge value add. And we like to rent those. You can do long-term, but we also really like the short-term model on VRBO, Airbnb, things along those lines, giving that sort of white glove, hospitality experience to our park model cabins. It's short-term rentals at scale, and that gets us really excited. In addition to that, you'll see golf cart rentals. We also do kayak rentals. These are just, more than anything, you're providing an additional amenity, but you're doing it with a charge behind it that can create additional incremental revenue. Generally, we have on-site campground stores where we'll sell all kinds of food and beverage. We'll also sell all kinds of RV supplies for folks that might need additional, if they have anything break down in their RV, if they want to winterize, there's a number of things that they will offer in the campground stores. Then in addition to that, you have site lock and pet fees. So these are two fees that are becoming pretty common. Generally, when you're booking a site, you're booking the type of site. It's kind of like when you go to a hotel, right? They don't tell you what room you're going to get when you initially book. You get there and they tell you, hey, you're going to be in this room or this room. And if you want to choose where in the RV campground you stay ahead of time, we've seen site lock fees up to $100 just to choose that specific spot in that campground, because they want to have maybe they want to be close to the bathhouse. Maybe they have needs that would require that, or maybe they want to be close to the playground because they have kids, or maybe they like the lakefront view. They can pay a site lock fee to be able to lock in that specific site on the campground. Pet fees are again, going to be pretty common, more common on the long-term sites. Then you have group events. Generally, events are a normal part of camping as a whole, and we don't charge for most events, but there can be also group events where if a group wants to come in and book the campground and rent the event space, some of our campgrounds have event halls in them. So we can do catering, we can do food and beverage, and just make it more of an experience for a group that we're servicing at that time. We also see dynamic pricing, kind of back to the online booking. When people are booking, today's software has the ability to set pricing during times of high demand higher and times of low demand lower. So similar to when you're booking, airplanes or hotels, dynamic pricing is becoming prevalent for those that have the technology behind them in the RV campground industry as well. And then, last but not least, just a reminder that, all of this is just about adding value to the customer and being customer centric. And in our case, we believe this is a hospitality business, whether you're long-term or short-term. We always go above and beyond to have a good quality event schedule in place where every single weekend we have something planned for the residents to be able to go there and create great experiences with the people around them. We do everything we can to seek to serve and just look out for them, answer the phones, be responsive, be attentive, take ownership as much as possible. Just train your people to be true servants of the hospitality industry and work to be able to create great guest experiences for the residents. I think that service-oriented mindset is really, really crucial when it comes to the RV campground space and adding value. And it's probably the number one easiest way to add value. And it's just important to keep that front and center.
All right, that's a lot. That's a lot of value add plays that you just touched on. I'm curious, Dylan, when you talk about expansion or development or adding amenity sets, playground, dog park, etc. Do you have a technique or a process that you use when you are evaluating whether or not that specific project or value add play makes sense? Is it the return on cost of that specific project, or what do you think about when you think of those things?
Yeah, so it's definitely trying to weigh what are, again, the low-hanging fruit or the items that are going to get you the highest bang for your buck on making improvements. I think, right now we like doing the string lighting, right? The string lights with group fire pits and Adirondack chairs, and just something to really inspire community more than anything. We've got these really high quality cornhole boards. We just do a lot of these items that are not super expensive to invest into, yet really do improve the overall look and feel and experience of the campground as a whole. So I would say starting with those key items, and then you can look at the more expensive items. Like we also look at improving sites from gravel to pavement, or oftentimes gravel to concrete. Right now we're installing a bunch of concrete sites at one of our places that is currently gravel. We're having built-in fire pits to the concrete at each site. So that will definitely drive a premium. But when you look at concrete, or when you look at the higher end amenities, such as installing pools or installing clubhouses, things along those lines, those are even bigger decisions and harder to really, really quantify. So I think you just like anything else, just like if you're looking at, apartments, say, and you're trying to see, do people really pay extra for the granite countertops? You got to look at what are the other buildings in the area doing. It's similar in this sense too, right? And to some degree, you're always going to have to just go with your gut of what, at the end of the day, after you've done all your research, what's really going to be able to drive value. Or maybe you get in and maybe you start surveying the residents, campers, and just determining what's really wanted in the place. There's probably a few things that we left out here or could add to this, but that's what's one of our favorite parts about the RV campground industry, is that there are a ton of different ways to be able to add value. It's a really fun space to operate in. It definitely is one that rewards creativity. And I think the best way to really put yourself in the customer's shoes is go out there and camp yourself and just experience what it's all about, and travel and check out other RV campgrounds and see what you like, see what the people around you like, and put it to work.
Well, with that being said, thank you guys for joining, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in and joining us on another episode of Operators and Allocators, hosted by the REquity Group, a vertically integrated private equity real estate company. You can find recordings of all shows along with other resources on our company website, therequitygroup.com, also listed in the show notes. A brief disclaimer to our listeners. Information presented herein is for discussion and illustrative purposes only and is not a recommendation or an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. All investments are subject to risk and past performance is no guarantee of future results. The views and opinions expressed by the REquity Group speaker are their own as of the date of the recording. Any such views are subject to change at any time based upon market or other conditions. We hope to see you next week.